beneath shifting sands and ancient skies, there exists a dream older than written language, older than the pyramids, older than civilization itself. The dream of bending time. You felt it before that strange pull when standing in ruins, touching stones carved by hands that turned to dust millennia ago. The whisper that maybe, just maybe, time isn't the straight line we've been taught to believe in. Maybe it curves. Maybe it loops back on itself like a serpent eating its own tail. Modern physics tells us time travel is impossible. Yet, ancient civilizations built their entire existence around cycles, lunar months, solar years, cosmic ages that repeat with clockwork precision. They understood something we've forgotten in our rush toward tomorrow. What if they were right? What if time isn't a river flowing endlessly forward, but an ocean we've barely learned to navigate? What if the ancients didn't just measure time, they mastered it? The evidence has been hiding in plain sight for centuries. 5,000 years ago, someone dragged 80-ton stones across 200 miles of English countryside. No wheels, no machinery, just human determination and a vision so powerful it defied every law of physics and common sense. Why? To build what we now call Stonehenge, a monument that shouldn't exist, serving a purpose we're only beginning to understand. Stand within the circle at dawn on the summer solstice, and you'll witness something that will rewrite everything you thought you knew about ancient intelligence. As the sun crests the horizon, its light passes through the heelstone with surgical precision, casting shadows that align perfectly with the monument's inner sanctum. This isn't luck. This is engineering that requires an understanding of celestial mechanics so advanced that we couldn't replicate it without computers. But here's what archaeologists whisper about in private. Stonehenge doesn't just track the sun, it predicts it. 18.5 years before an eclipse occurs, the monument's shadow patterns shift in ways that warn of coming darkness. The builders weren't just watching the sky, they were reading time itself, like a manuscript written in stone and starlight. 3,000 miles south, along the banks of the Nile, Egyptian priests were perfecting their own dialogue with eternity. The Merketa, simple notched palm branch paired with a plumb line, could track stellar movements with accuracy that modern astronomy envies. But this wasn't casual stargazing. In the Temple of Karnak, these instruments served a purpose that sounds like science fiction. They were mapping the architecture of time. Walk through Karnak's hypostyle hall today, and you're moving through the largest religious complex ever built. 134 columns, each one positioned according to celestial coordinates that align with specific stars at precise moments throughout the year. The priests called it the horizon of heaven on earth, a place where the boundary between temporal and eternal dissolved completely. They believed time moved in layers. The surface layer, what we experience as seconds, minutes, hours, was merely an illusion. Beneath it flowed deeper currents, the stellar year, the divine year, the great year of 26,000 rotations that governed the rise and fall of civilizations. The Merkhet didn't just measure these layers, it allowed trained priests to step between them. Ancient texts describe ceremonies where time itself became malleable. Pharaohs would enter the inner sanctum during specific astronomical alignments, emerging hours later, claiming to have experienced visions of future dynasties or conversations with long-dead ancestors. Modern scholars dismiss these as metaphorical descriptions of religious ecstasy. But what if they weren't metaphors at all? Consider this. Both Stonehenge and Karnak were modified repeatedly over centuries, each renovation adding new astronomical alignments, new temporal coordinates, as if their builders were fine-tuning instruments of incredible complexity. Instruments designed not just to observe time, but to interact with it. The deeper you dig into ancient timekeeping, the stranger it becomes. These weren't primitive people, fumbling with crude sundials. They possessed mathematical understanding that we're still trying to decode. They knew the Earth's axial tilt shifts in 26,000-year cycles. They tracked the precession of equinoxes with precision that wouldn't be matched until the 20th century. They mapped planetary movements that can't be seen without telescopes. Tau stand in Karnak's sacred lake at midnight during the new moon. And you'll understand why ancient priests spent decades learning to read the stars. In that perfect darkness, with the temple's massive columns reflected in still water, the boundary between earth and sky disappears. You're floating in space, surrounded by constellations that wheel overhead with hypnotic regularity. Time becomes visible not as numbers on a clock, but as geometric patterns written across the cosmos. The priests saw something else in those patterns. They saw time as sacred architecture, with each star serving as a cornerstone in a vast cathedral of duration. They believed that by aligning earthly structures with celestial movements, they could create doorways not through space, but through time itself. This wasn't superstition. This was applied mathematics, using principles we're only beginning to grasp. Modern physicists talk about space-time as a fabric that can be bent by gravity. Ancient architects built monuments that seemed designed to bend it with precision and purpose. The evidence is carved in stone. Calendars that account for leap years, centuries before such adjustments were mathematically proven necessary. Star maps accurate to within minutes of arc. Architectural alignments that predict astronomical events with computer-like precision. But the most compelling evidence isn't in what they built, it's in what they left behind. Texts describing temporal journeys, art depicting figures who exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, mathematical formulae that solve equations about the nature of time that our own scientists are still struggling to understand. These ancient timekeepers weren't just watching the clock. They were building machines made of stone and starlight, designed to do something that modern science insists is impossible: to step outside the flow of linear time and navigate the deeper currents that govern reality itself. The question isn't whether they succeeded. The question is whether we're brave enough to follow in their footsteps. In the beginning, there was no time, only an ocean of infinite possibility, dark and still, where past and future existed as one eternal moment. Then the gods and demons struck a bargain that would shatter eternity into fragments, what we now call history. They would churn this cosmic ocean using Mount Mandara as a rod and the serpent Vasuki as rope, extracting from its depths the nectar of immortality. But they got something else instead: time itself, emerging like poison before the sweetness, threatening to destroy everything it touched. This isn't mythology. This is the Hindu understanding of how temporal reality began, not as a river flowing forward, but as a wheel spinning endlessly through cycles so vast they make geological ages look like heartbeats, while Western minds struggle to grasp centuries. Hindu cosmology operates in units that dwarf the lifetime of stars. A single day in the life of Brahma spans 4.32 billion years. His night lasts just as long, and Brahma himself lives for 100 years of such days before dissolving back into the absolute, only to be reborn as creation begins again. But here's what separates Hindu time from every other temporal framework. It's not linear progression toward some final judgment or ultimate entropy. It's eternal return, each cycle containing the same patterns, the same rise and fall of consciousness, the same opportunities for liberation or bondage. Time becomes not a prison, but a spiral staircase where every step upward offers a slightly different perspective on the same eternal dance. The Yugas, the great ages that comprise these cycles, unfold like acts in a cosmic drama. The Satya Yuga, golden age of perfection, where humans live for 100,000 years and possess natural psychic abilities. The Treta Yuga, where the first shadows of decline appear, though knowledge and virtue still dominate. The Devapara Yuga, age of bronze, where ignorance grows stronger and human lifespans shrink to mere millennia. And finally, the Kali Yuga, current age of iron and darkness, where truth becomes rare as diamonds and humans struggle to live even 100 years. We're living in the final act right now, the age where kings become thieves, where children disobey parents, where the very fabric of Dharma cosmic order frays at the edges. But here's the radical insight that sets Hindu cosmology apart from apocalyptic thinking. Even this darkness serves a purpose. The Kali Yuga isn't punishment, it's compression. Like coal becoming diamond under pressure, consciousness accelerates its evolution when faced with maximum resistance. Ancient texts describe something impossible. Sages who learned to navigate between these temporal layers. The Yoga Vasistha speaks of sage Valmiki discovering chambers within Mount Meru where different yugas existed simultaneously. Step through one doorway, and you're in the Satya Yuga, surrounded by beings of light who've never known suffering. Step through another, and you're witnessing the Treta Yuga's first wars between gods and demons. The mountain becomes a temporal nexus, where all four ages coexist like rooms in an infinite house. But this wasn't just mystical vision. Hindu mathematics developed concepts that wouldn't appear in Western thought until the modern era. Zero, just as placeholder, but as the mathematical representation of infinite potential. Infinity not as abstraction, but as calculable reality. They mapped cosmic cycles using numbers so large they required new forms of notation. The Puranas describe time periods using terms like Kalpa and Mahayuga with the casual precision of modern astrophysicists discussing galactic rotations. Consider the implications. If time truly moves in cycles, then everything that has happened will happen again. Every choice, every possibility, every moment of suffering and joy spinning back around like prayers on an eternal wheel. But Hindu philosophy adds a crucial twist. While events repeat, consciousness evolves. You might live the same life infinite times, but each iteration offers the chance to respond differently, to break free from the patterns that bind you to the wheel. This is why Hindu texts describe time not as enemy, but as teacher. Each yuga serves as a classroom with specific lessons. The golden ages teach through abundance and ease here. Virtue comes naturally because everything supports harmonious existence. The darker ages teach through friction and challenge here. Virtue becomes choice, requiring conscious effort and inner strength. Both types of learning are necessary for consciousness to mature beyond the need for temporal experience altogether. The most advanced practitioners learned to read these temporal currents, like sailors reading wind and tide. The Mahabharata describes Krishna possessing cosmic sight that allowed him to perceive all four yugas simultaneously, seeing how actions in one age would echo through subsequent cycles. He wasn't just a spiritual teacher, he was a temporal navigator, guiding humanity through the transition between ages with full awareness of what lay ahead. Modern science has begun discovering what Hindu sages mapped millennia ago. Time isn't uniform. It bends around massive objects. It flows differently at different scales. Quantum mechanics suggests that at the deepest level, past and future exist simultaneously, separated only by the observer's perspective. Hindu cosmology has always insisted that linear time is my illusion, created by limited awareness. Behind the veil of sequential moments lies something far more interesting, a dance of consciousness with its own infinite potential. The churning of the cosmic ocean continues right now. Every moment, gods and demons within us negotiate between chaos and order, extracting from the depths of experience both poison and nectar. The wise learn to taste the poison without being destroyed, to drink the nectar without becoming intoxicated. They discover what the ancient texts always promised, that time itself is consciousness, exploring its own depths. And we are both the explorers and the territory being explored. The wheel turns, the ages cycle, and somewhere within the vast mathematics of eternity, a doorway remains open for those ready to step beyond time, altogether into the deathless ground from which all yugas arise and to which they return. Standing before the temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, you're witnessing something that shouldn't exist. A stone calendar so precise it predicted eclipses thousands of years into the future. A monument that transforms shadows into serpents. Twice a year, exactly on schedule. But here's what archaeologists didn't want to tell you about the Maya. They didn't just track time. They weaponized it. The Western world sees time as a river flowing forward. The Maya saw it as a wheel, spinning endlessly, carrying the same patterns, the same fates, the same inevitable conclusions back around again. Every 5,125 years, their long count calendar completed one full cycle. December 21st, 2012, wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of the fifth cycle and the beginning of the sixth. But cycles of what? Walk closer to Kukulkan's base. Count the steps leading to the summit 365, matching the days in a solar year. But that's just the surface mathematics. The real revelation comes when you understand that each terrace, each carved serpent head, each precise angle serves multiple temporal functions simultaneously. This isn't just architecture, it's a machine built to read the deepest patterns of cosmic time. The Maya discovered something that modern physicists are only beginning to grasp. Time has texture. It flows differently at different scales, creating interference patterns where past and future echo into the present. They called these intersection points burdens of time, moments when the temporal fabric grows thin enough to glimpse what lies ahead or behind. Their priests weren't fortune tellers. They were temporal mathematicians, using calendars so complex they required specialized schools to master. The sacred round of 260 days interlocked with the solar year-like gears in a cosmic clock, but beneath these lay deeper cycles. The Venus cycle of 584 days, tracking the planet's dance between morning and evening star. The eclipse cycle of 405 lunations, predicting when darkness would swallow the sun. The precession cycle of 26,000 years, mapping the slow wobble of Earth's axis through the zodiac. Each cycle carried its own energy, its own inevitable outcomes. When multiple cycles aligned, what the Maya called Lord of the Night configurations, reality itself became malleable. These weren't random astronomical events. They were windows in time, moments when the boundaries between past, present, and future dissolved completely. The Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving Mayan books, contains tables that track Venus appearances 6,000 years into the future with accuracy that wasn't matched until modern computers. But Venus wasn't just another planet to the Maya. It was the cosmic heartbeat, the drum that marked the rhythm of war and peace, death and rebirth. When Venus vanished into superior conjunction, disappearing behind the sun for 8 days, entire civilizations held their breath. In that darkness, time itself reset. This is why 2012 caused such global anxiety. We sensed something the Maya always knew. Time doesn't just pass, accumulates weight. The completion of the 13th Bacton marked not an ending, but a critical mass, like water reaching its boiling point. Linear time was about to phase shift into something entirely different. The evidence wasn't hidden. It was carved in stone across Mesoamerica. Monument 6 at Tortuguero contains the only direct reference to 2012 in Mayan inscriptions, describing the descent of Bolan Yacht-K, a deity associated with conflict and change. But the text is deliberately damaged, the crucial passages worn away as if someone wanted to obscure what was coming. Stand at Kukulkan during the spring equinox, and you'll witness the most sophisticated example of temporal engineering ever created. As shadows creep down the pyramid's edge, they form the body of a serpent that appears to slither toward the carved heads at the base. But this isn't just clever architecture, it's a countdown clock. The serpent descends exactly 91 steps, marking the passage from winter's death to spring's rebirth. The Maya were encoding the rhythm of cosmic renewal into stone. Their concept of prophecy was radically different from Western fortune-telling. They didn't believe the future was fixed. They believed it was cyclical. The same patterns that played out in previous Bactons would return in altered forms, like variations on an eternal theme. By studying these patterns, their priest astronomers could predict not specific events, but the types of energy that would dominate coming ages. The 5th sun hour current world age was characterized by movement, earthquakes, the violent reshaping of reality through tectonic forces. The 6th sun, beginning in 2012, would be governed by wind, by the movement of consciousness itself, by rapid changes in how humans perceive and navigate reality. Not destruction, but transformation. Not endings, but evolution accelerated beyond recognition. Modern researchers have discovered that Mayan mathematics included concepts like zero and place, notations centuries before they appeared elsewhere. But their most sophisticated calculations weren't about commerce or engineering. They were mapping the deep structure of time itself. They found mathematical relationships between astronomical cycles that suggested the universe operated according to harmonic principles, like a vast musical instrument where planets and stars served as strings vibrating at cosmic frequencies. The temple around you isn't just observing these frequencies designed to resonate with them. Every dimension, every angle, every carved symbol serves as a tuning fork calibrated to specific temporal harmonics. When the conditions align, when the cycles converge, when the serpent descends, something extraordinary happens. Time becomes music you can hear, patterns you can see, rhythms you can feel in your bones. The Maya didn't fear the future because they understood the eternal return. What has been will be again. But consciousness, human awareness itself, spirals upward through each cycle, gaining wisdom, developing new capacities, learning to dance with time instead of being dragged along by its current. The clock is still ticking. The serpent still descends. And somewhere in the mathematics of stone and starlight, the next cycle is already beginning. In ancient Greece, time wasn't just a concept, it was a pantheon. 3 distinct deities ruled the temporal realm, each governing a different aspect of existence that our modern clocks can't measure. Kronos, the old god who devoured his children, marked the relentless march of sequential moments. Kairos, the youngest god with razor-sharp features, governed the art of perfect timing. And In, the eternal youth with a serpent wrapped around his body, embodied time beyond time, the eternal now from which all other temporalities emerged. The Greeks understood something we've forgotten in our rush toward digital precision. Time isn't uniform. It has personality, intention, and most importantly, it responds to human consciousness in ways that defy mechanical measurement. Kronos was cannibalistic by nature. Every second he consumed became part of his being, never to return. Linear time, quantitative time, the time that ages your body and turns civilizations to dust. But here's what makes Greek mythology so sophisticated. Kronos wasn't the ultimate power. He was trapped in his own mechanics, doomed to repeat the same destructive patterns until someone learned to think outside his domain. That someone was Zeus, representing not just divine authority, but a different relationship with temporality altogether. Zeus didn't defeat Kronos through superior force. He defeated him through superior timing. He learned to read the deeper currents of Kairos. Kairos moved like lightning through the temporal landscape, creating moments of opportunity so brief they could only be grasped by those with trained perception. The Greeks depicted him as a youth with a long forelock but bald in Baku, could grab him as he approached. But once he passed, there was nothing to hold on to. This wasn't poetic metaphor. This was practical philosophy about the nature of temporal navigation. Consider the Battle of Marathon. The Athenians didn't win through superior numbers or equipment. They won because their general Miltiades could read the invisible architecture of opportunity. He waited until the Persian cavalry was absent, until the wind patterns favored Greek arrows, until the cosmic configuration aligned with Athenian destiny. Then he struck. turning certain defeat into impossible victory through precise temporal calibration. But Kairos operated according to principles that make modern minds uncomfortable. Opportunity wasn't random, it was woven into the fabric of fate itself, governed by patterns that connected individual actions to cosmic rhythms. The Greeks called this concept moiernot, predetermined destiny. But the fundamental laws that govern how possibilities crystallize into actualities. This is where Greek temporality becomes genuinely radical. They believed that skilled individuals could learn to read these patterns, to see the hidden threads connecting present choices to future outcomes. The oracle at Delphi wasn't just making predictions, she was teaching temporal literacy, showing petitioners how their current decisions existed within larger cycles of cause and effect. The most sophisticated practitioners learned to work with I in eternal time that exists outside the Chronos-Kairos dialectic altogether. Ion wasn't duration, but depth, not sequence, but presence, so complete that past and future collapsed into an eternal now. Philosophers like Heraclitus described this state as logos, the underlying pattern that gives meaning to temporal change. In the mystery schools, initiates learn techniques for accessing Ion consciousness through specific breathing patterns, mathematical contemplations, and ritual practices timed to celestial alignments. They could temporarily step outside linear temporality and perceive reality from what they called the view of the gods, a perspective where all moments exist. Simultaneously, these weren't abstract spiritual exercises. The Greeks developed practical applications for temporal navigation that sound like science fiction. Architects designed buildings that channeled Kairos energy, creating spaces where inspiration and innovation occurred with unusual frequency. Military strategists learned to read the signs of the times, synchronizing attacks with cosmic conditions that favored victory. Even ordinary citizens practiced what they called temporal wisdom, the art of living in harmony with both linear time and eternal time simultaneously. The mythology encodes instructions for these practices. When Perseus uses Medusa's reflection to avoid being turned to stone, he's demonstrating how to perceive dangerous realities indirectly through temporal displacement. When Odysseus escapes the sirens by having himself bound to the mast, he's showing how to navigate temporal temptations by creating structural constraints that overcome momentary weakness. But the deepest teaching comes from the relationship between the three temporal gods themselves. Kronos represents the mechanical aspect of time that dominates ordinary consciousness. Kairos represents the creative aspect that allows for genuine novelty and transformation. Ion represents the transcendent aspect that provides context and meaning for both linear and creative temporality. The Greeks insisted that wisdom required learning to work with all three simultaneously. Pure Chronos consciousness leads to mechanistic thinking that ignores the creative possibilities inherent in each moment. Pure Kairos consciousness leads to impulsive action disconnected from long-term consequences. Pure Ion consciousness leads to spiritual bypassing that ignores practical responsibilities. Mastery came through what they called temporal integration, the ability to move fluidly between different temporal states as circumstances required. A philosopher might spend hours in Ion contemplation, then shift into Kairos awareness to recognize the perfect moment for action. then engage Chronos consciousness to execute plans with systematic precision. This wasn't just ancient wisdom, it was applied psychology that recognized something our modern world has forgotten. Time isn't just what clocks measure. It's the medium through which consciousness explores its own infinite potential. And those who learn to navigate its deeper currents gain access to possibilities that linear thinking can't even imagine. The gods are still here, still governing the temporal realm. We've just forgotten how to see them. Deep beneath the Temple of Abydos, where tourists never venture, lies a chamber that shouldn't exist according to conventional archaeology. The Assyrian, a massive granite structure built with precision that defies the Bronze Age tools supposedly used to carve it. But here's what makes your blood run cold. The hieroglyphs covering its walls don't just describe the afterlife. They provide step-by-step instructions for navigating between different states of time. Walk through the temple's outer courts, and you're following the same path that pharaohs took when they came here to die. Not literally, though many did choose Abydos as their final resting place, but symbolically, undergoing a ritual death that allowed them to be reborn with capabilities that transcended ordinary human limitations. The hieroglyphs call it becoming an ACH, a being who could move freely between the temporal realm of the living and the eternal realm of the gods. The walls tell the story of Osiris, murdered by his brother Set, dismembered, scattered across Egypt, then reassembled by his wife Isis and brought back to life. But this isn't mythology. This is technical documentation of a process the Egyptians discovered for fragmenting consciousness across multiple time streams, then reassembling it with expanded temporal awareness. Consider the mathematical precision encoded in the myth. Osiris is cut into 14 pieces, matching the 14 days of the waning moon. Isis searches for exactly 3,000 years to find all the fragments, matching the precession cycle that governs the slow wobble of Earth's axis. When she reassembles him, Osiris doesn't return to linear life. He becomes lord of the Duatha realm that exists between day and night, between life and death, between one moment and the next. The pyramid texts, carved into the walls of old kingdom burial chambers, describe this transformation with startling specificity. The deceased pharaoh doesn't simply go to heaven in some vague spiritual sense. He undergoes a carefully orchestrated process of temporal disintegration and reintegration that allows his consciousness to exist simultaneously in multiple time frames. First comes the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed exactly at sunset when day transitions to night. The priest uses an adze tool shaped like the Big Dipper constellations to symbolically cut open pathways in the pharaoh's head that correspond to specific star positions. But recent analysis of the ritual implements reveals something impossible. They're made from meteoric iron, materials that shouldn't have been available to Bronze Age civilizations, designed with aerodynamic properties that suggest far more sophisticated metallurgy than officially recognized. The texts describe what happens next in language that sounds like quantum physics. The pharaoh's Bohis conscious awareness separates from his Kohis life force, allowing each to navigate different temporal domains. The BA could travel instantly across vast distances, experience past and future simultaneously, even split into multiple versions that could exist in different time periods concurrently. Meanwhile, the The QA remained anchored to specific temporal coordinates, serving as a home base that prevented complete dissolution into eternity. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The hieroglyphs at Abydos don't just describe this process. Metaphorically, they include detailed technical specifications, astronomical alignments required for optimal temporal navigation, mathematical formulae for calculating the sacred hours when the barriers between time streams grow thin, even architectural blueprints for creating physical spaces that amplify these temporal effects. The Osirian itself appears to be one such space, built entirely from massive granite blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together without mortar, using precision that modern engineers struggle to replicate. The chamber floods with Nile water during certain seasons, creating an underground lake that perfectly reflects the night sky. The Egyptians called it the waters of Nun, the primordial ocean from which time itself emerged. Stand in the Osirian during the new moon, when darkness is complete and something extraordinary happens. The reflected stars above and below create the illusion that you're floating in space, surrounded by constellations that wheel overhead in hypnotic patterns. But the ancient texts suggest this isn't just visual trickery. They describe specific meditative techniques performed in this environment that could induce what they called stellar consciousness, awareness that transcends the boundaries of individual identity and linear time. The process wasn't without dangers. The pyramid texts warn repeatedly about the devourers that exist in the temporal borderlands and Hades that feed on consciousness trapped between time streams. They describe protection spells, navigation techniques, even emergency procedures for souls that become lost in the temporal maze. This reads like training manuals for interdimensional travel, complete with safety protocols and troubleshooting guides. Modern Egyptologists dismiss these as religious metaphors, but the mathematical precision embedded in the texts suggests otherwise. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, what we call the Book of the Dead, contains calculations that accurately predict astronomical events thousands of years in advance. It maps stellar positions with precision that requires not just observational astronomy, but deep understanding of celestial mechanics. More disturbing still are the references to gates of Rossetto, doorways that open during specific astronomical configurations, allowing passage between different temporal domains. The texts don't just describe these gates metaphorically. They provide exact coordinates, timing requirements, even the specific spoken formulae needed to activate them. Abydos contains physical evidence that these descriptions might be more than symbolic. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed a network of chambers beneath the temple complex, connected by tunnels that form geometric patterns matching the constellation maps carved on the walls above. Many of these subterranean spaces remain unexplored, sealed by the Egyptian government for reasons that aren't entirely clear. The pharaohs who underwent the Osirian transformation didn't just rule Egypt, they claimed to rule time itself. Inscriptions describe them traveling to the first time when the gods established the cosmic order, consulting with their own future selves, even attending their own funeral ceremonies before returning to life with prophetic knowledge. This temporal mastery extended to practical governance. Egyptian records show uncanny accuracy in predicting Nile floods, astronomical events, even political upheavals, decades in advance. They developed agricultural techniques based on astronomical cycles that modern farmers are only beginning to understand. They built monuments that align with star positions, not as they appeared when constructed, but as they would appear thousands of years later. The resurrection cycle of Osiris wasn't just mythology, was technology, a systematic method for expanding consciousness beyond the confines of linear time, allowing trained individuals to navigate the deeper currents of causality that shape historical events. The pharaohs weren't just political leaders, they were temporal navigators, using their expanded awareness to guide civilization through the challenges that lay ahead. The gates are still there, carved in stone beneath the shifting sands of Abydos. The formulae still work, embedded in hieroglyphs that scholars translate as religious poetry, but might actually be operating manuals for consciousness itself. The question isn't whether the ancient Egyptians discovered methods for transcending linear time. The question is whether we're ready to follow their instructions. Walk deeper into the Osirian. Listen to the water lapping against granite walls, built to last forever. Feel the weight of centuries pressing down from above. And remember that somewhere in these depths, pharaohs once learned to die and be reborn as masters of time itself. The transformation is still possible. The gates are still open. You just have to be brave enough to step through. In 1901, Greek sponge divers discovered something impossible off the coast of Antikythera. Beneath 50 meters of Mediterranean water, corroded beyond recognition, lay fragments of what appeared to be an ancient Greek computer, not a primitive, calculating device, a machine so sophisticated that when modern scientists finally decoded its function, they realized it could predict eclipses, track planetary positions, and calculate astronomical events with precision that wouldn't be matched. For another 1,500 years, the Antikythera mechanism shouldn't exist. According to conventional archaeology, Bronze Age civilizations possessed neither the mathematical knowledge nor the manufacturing precision required to build such a device. Yet here it was, a clockwork cosmos of bronze gears and dials that could map the movements of celestial bodies, decades into the future with computer-like accuracy. But here's what makes the mechanism genuinely unsettling. It wasn't just predicting astronomical events. Recent analysis reveals that it was designed to track what the Greeks called temporal nodes, moments when multiple astronomical cycles converge, creating windows of opportunity that skilled navigators could exploit for purposes that remain mysterious. Derek de Sola Price, the Yale professor who first decoded the mechanism, made a disturbing discovery. The gear ratios weren't random. They encoded mathematical relationships that correspond to fundamental constants governing the structure of spacetime. The primary gear train, with its 223-tooth eclipse cycle wheel, doesn't just track lunar eclipses. It maps what modern physicists call gravitational resonance patterns, periodic fluctuations in space-time curvature that occur when massive celestial bodies align in specific configurations. Walk through the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where fragments of the mechanism are displayed, and you're looking at evidence that ancient Greek engineers understood principles of temporal mechanics that our own science is only beginning to grasp. The device contains gear ratios that match the mathematical constants, governing quantum temporal effects relationships between time, gravity, and consciousness that weren't supposed to be discovered until the 20th century. The deeper mystery lies in who built it. The craftsmanship requires manufacturing tolerances that approach modern precision. The mathematical sophistication implies understanding of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be formally developed until Kepler and Newton. The design philosophy suggests a worldview where time itself was seen as navigable territory rather than an unstoppable current carrying everything toward entropy. This wasn't an isolated achievement. Across the ancient world, civilizations developed technologies that suggest far more sophisticated understanding of temporal mechanics than officially recognized. The Babylonian astronomical diaries, carved in cuneiform across thousands of clay tablets, contain mathematical models that predict planetary positions thousands of years in advance with accuracy that requires not just observational data, but deep theoretical understanding of orbital dynamics. Consider the mathematical impossibility of what they accomplished. Babylonian astronomers tracked Jupiter's position through its 12-year orbital cycle, Venus through its 8-year cycle, Saturn through its 29-year journey around the zodiac. But they didn't just track these cycles individually, they calculated the complex interference patterns created when multiple planetary cycles interact, producing mathematical models that account for variables. Modern astronomy requires supercomputers to process. The Mal-Appen tablets, dating to 700 BC, contain star catalogs that map over 30 constellations with positional accuracy that shouldn't be possible without telescopes. But more disturbing still are the prayer time calculations embedded within. These astronomical tables precise timing requirements for ritual activities that supposedly enhanced the effectiveness of temporal navigation techniques. These weren't primitive superstitions. The mathematical precision embedded in these calculations suggests systematic experimentation with time, manipulation technologies that we're only beginning to understand. The tablets describe specific astronomical configurations that create what they called gates of Anu moments, when the normal flow of causality becomes malleable, allowing trained practitioners to influence past and future events through precisely timed ritual activities. The Chinese developed their own versions of temporal technology. The Han Dynasty's Grand Unification Calendar, completed in 104 BCP, doesn't just track solar and lunar cycles, it maps what Chinese astronomers called temporal confluences, moments, when the flow of historical events becomes predictable through mathematical analysis of astronomical patterns. Chinese court records describe devices that sound like science fiction. The cosmic mirror of Emperor Wu, which supposedly showed reflections of past and future events during specific astronomical alignments. The time chariot of the Yellow Emperor, a mechanical device that could allegedly transport consciousness across vast temporal distances. Modern scholars dismiss these as mythological embellishments, but the mathematical precision of Chinese astronomical calculations suggests technological capabilities that we're only beginning to appreciate. Perhaps most intriguing are the Maya, whose understanding of temporal mechanics surpassed even the Greeks in sophistication. The Dresden Codex contains calculations that track Venus cycles 6,000 years into the future, eclipse predictions accurate to within hours, and mathematical models that describe time as a multidimensional matrix where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. But the Maya went further than just predicting astronomical events. Their inscriptions describe technological devices designed to exploit temporal anomalies for practical purposes. The mirror of Tezcatlipoca, which supposedly allowed priests to observe events in distant time periods. The serpent of time, a mechanical device that could allegedly accelerate or decelerate the subjective experience of duration. The crystal skulls, which various Mesoamerican cultures claimed could store and replay temporal information like biological computers. Modern attempts to reverse engineer these alleged technologies have produced disturbing results. Scientists working with replicas of the Antikythera mechanism report that the device seems to influence local gravitational fields in ways that shouldn't be possible with Bronze Age technology. Research teams studying Mayan calendar mathematics have discovered that certain date calculations produce numerical sequences that match quantum mechanical constants governing temporal uncertainty. The deeper you investigate ancient temporal technologies, the more you realize that our ancestors weren't primitive people fumbling with crude tools. They were sophisticated engineers working with principles of physics that we've forgotten rather than discovered. They understood that time isn't just duration, it's a navigable dimension that responds to consciousness, mathematics, and precisely engineered mechanical interventions. The evidence is hiding in plain sight, scattered across museums and archaeological sites around the world. Devices that shouldn't exist, calculations that require impossible knowledge, inscriptions that describe temporal manipulation techniques with engineering precision. Each piece of evidence, individually dismissible as coincidence or misinterpretation. Collectively, they point toward a conclusion that makes mainstream archaeologists profoundly uncomfortable. Our ancestors didn't just measure time, they built machines to manipulate it. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't just a calculator, it was a temporal navigation device. The great temples weren't just religious centers, they were technological installations designed to exploit specific gravitational and electromagnetic conditions that influence the flow of time itself. The knowledge hasn't been lost, it's been hidden, dismissed, relegated to the margins of serious academic inquiry. But the devices remain, their bronze gears still, capable of calculating astronomical events with precision that our digital computers struggle to match. The inscriptions remain, their mathematical formulas still describing relationships between consciousness and time that quantum physicists are only beginning to explore. The question isn't whether ancient civilizations possessed technologies for manipulating time. The question is whether we're ready to acknowledge what the evidence has been telling us all along. That our understanding of both history and physics is far more limited than we've dared to admit. The gears are still turning, the calculations still work, and somewhere in the corroded bronze fragments, scattered across museum displays, the secrets of temporal navigation wait to be rediscovered by a civilization brave enough to confront its own forgotten past. In the winter of 1398, Brother Johannes of Glastonbury stepped out of the abbey's scriptorium to gather firewood and vanished for 3 days. When he returned, pale and speaking in fragments, he claimed to have witnessed the construction of the great cathedral, spoken with Joseph of Arimathea, and observed events that wouldn't unfold for another century. The Abbey records note this with the clinical precision typical of monastic documentation. Brother Johannes returned to us changed, bearing knowledge of times yet to come. What makes this account genuinely unsettling isn't its supernatural claims medieval chronicles overflow with miraculous tales, but its mathematical precision. Johannes described architectural details of cathedral expansions that wouldn't begin for 50 years, accurately predicted the dates of 3 papal deaths, and provided astronomical calculations for eclipses that wouldn't occur until the 15th century. The Abbey's chronicler, Brother Thomas of Wells, documented these predictions with dates and specifics that can be verified against historical records. Every prediction proved accurate. Medieval monasteries were more than centers of prayer and learning, they were laboratories for consciousness exploration. Monks spent decades mastering meditative techniques that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. They practiced what they called contemplative mathematics, using prayer wheels, astronomical calculations, and architectural geometry to induce altered states of awareness that seemed to transcend the normal boundaries of space and time. The Glastonbury archives contain similar accounts scattered across centuries. Brother Aldwin, who disappeared during Matins in 1203 and returned speaking fluent Greek despite never having studied the language. Sister Marguerite of the nearby convent, who vanished while tending the herb garden and reappeared 3 weeks later with detailed knowledge of medicinal plants from the New World to centuries before Columbus. Brother Edmund, who stepped into the cloister during a thunderstorm and emerged, describing the Great Fire of London with prophetic accuracy. Each account follows the same pattern. A monk engaged in routine spiritual practice suddenly encounters what they describe as luminous stillness, a state where time seems to stop completely. In this suspended moment, they witness scenes from the monastery's past and future, experience conversations with long-dead saints, or find themselves transported to locations they've never visited. When they return to normal consciousness, days or weeks have passed in what felt like moments. But here's what separates these medieval accounts from typical religious visions. They contain verifiable information that the experiencers couldn't have known through normal means. Brother Johannes didn't just see mystical lights, he returned with architectural blueprints for construction projects that wouldn't begin for decades. He described technological innovations that hadn't been invented, political events that hadn't occurred, astronomical phenomena that hadn't been observed. The mathematical precision embedded in these accounts suggests something far more sophisticated than religious hallucination. Medieval monasteries were centers of astronomical learning, and many of the monks who experienced these time slips were trained in advanced mathematics and celestial observation. They understood concepts like precession, planetary cycles, and eclipse prediction with accuracy that required both theoretical knowledge and practical computational skills. Consider the account of Brother Gerardus of Cluny, recorded in 1284 during a night vigil in the observatory tower. He claimed to witness the abbey's construction in the year 910, complete with detailed descriptions of building techniques that archaeological excavation has since confirmed as accurate. But Gerardus also described conversations with the abbey's founder, Abbot Berno, including mathematical discussions about the relationship between architectural proportions and planetary movements that match advanced geometric principles, not formally codified until the Renaissance. The monasteries themselves seem to have been designed to facilitate these experiences. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of major medieval abbeys reveal underground chambers built according to precise acoustic principles that create standing wave patterns at specific frequencies. These subterranean spaces, often dismissed as simple storage areas, contain architectural features that modern acoustics research suggests could induce altered states of consciousness through sound resonance. The rule of Saint Benedict, which governed monastic life across Europe, includes specific timing requirements for prayer that correspond to astronomical cycles. The canonical hours weren't arbitrary. They align with natural circadian rhythms and electromagnetic field fluctuations that modern chronobiology has shown to influence consciousness in measurable ways. The monks weren't just following religious obligations, they were implementing a sophisticated psychological technology for expanding temporal awareness. The chronicles describe specific techniques that monks use to induce these temporal experiences. The prayer of the hours combined repetitive vocalizations with precise breathing patterns and mathematical visualization exercises. The contemplation of the wheel involved focusing on mandala-like geometric patterns while calculating planetary positions. The meditation of the rose window used cathedral architecture as a focusing device for consciousness expansion experiments. These weren't just spiritual practices. They were applied neuroscience, using principles that modern research is only beginning to understand. Recent studies of Tibetan monks practicing similar techniques show measurable changes in brain activity, including increased gamma wave synchronization and altered perception of time duration. Medieval European monastics appear to have developed comparable technologies using different cultural frameworks. The most detailed account comes from the Chronicle of Melk Abbey, written by Brother Adelard in 1456. He describes encountering what he calls the eternal moment, a state where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. In this condition, he claims to have observed the abbey across multiple centuries, witnessing its construction, flourishing, destruction, and rebuilding as a single unified process. Adelard's description includes technical details that shouldn't have been available to a 15th century monk. He accurately describes the abbey's Roman foundations, which weren't excavated until the 19th century. He predicts architectural modifications that wouldn't occur until the Baroque period. Most impossibly, he provides detailed accounts of the abbey's role in preserving manuscripts. During World War II, nearly 5 centuries before the conflict occurred, modern neuroscience offers possible explanations for these phenomena. Research into temporal perception suggests that consciousness doesn't experience time as a uniform flow, but constructs the sense of duration from multiple overlapping processes under specific conditions: sensory deprivation, electromagnetic field exposure. These timing mechanisms can become desynchronized, potentially allowing access to information that exists outside normal temporal boundaries. The monastery environments may have created optimal conditions for such desynchronization. The combination of repetitive prayer, mathematical visualization, architectural acoustics, and electromagnetic fields generated by large stone structures could theoretically induce states where normal temporal perception breaks down completely. But The medieval accounts suggest something more radical than altered perception. They describe actual information transfer across temporal boundaries. Brother Johannes didn't just experience subjective time distortion. He returned with verifiable knowledge of future events. This implies not just consciousness expansion, but genuine temporal navigation. The monasteries kept detailed records precisely because they understood the importance of documenting these phenomena. They weren't recording religious miracles. They were conducting systematic research into the nature of time and consciousness. The monks who experienced these slips weren't seen as blessed visionaries. They were treated as research subjects whose experiences provided valuable data about the deeper structure of reality. The chronicles end abruptly around 1500, coinciding with the Renaissance shift toward mechanical models of time and space. The new scientific paradigm had no place for subjective temporal experiences, dismissing them as superstitious remnants of a less enlightened age. The monasteries stopped documenting these phenomena, and the techniques for inducing them were gradually forgotten. But the records remain, preserved in abbey archives across Europe, documenting centuries of systematic research into temporal navigation. The question isn't whether medieval monks experienced something genuinely anomalous. The documentation is too detailed and consistent to dismiss as collective delusion. The question is whether we're ready to acknowledge that consciousness might indeed be capable of transcending the temporal boundaries that physics insists are absolute. In 1309, something unprecedented began ticking in the bell tower of Canterbury Cathedral. Not just another sundial or water clock, but a mechanical heartbeat that would fundamentally alter human consciousness. The first recorded mechanical clock. In England, for the first time in history, time wasn't just observed. It was manufactured, packaged into identical units, and sold to the highest bidder. What seemed like technological progress was actually the beginning of humanity's most profound psychological transformation. Before mechanical clocks, time belonged to the natural world. Monks prayed at sunrise, farmers worked until dusk, merchants traveled when seasons permitted. Time flowed like water, sometimes rushing, sometimes pooling in quiet eddies, always responsive to the rhythms of life itself. But the mechanical clock introduced something revolutionary and terrifying. Time that existed independently of human experience, grinding forward with relentless uniformity regardless of desire, need, or natural rhythm. The psychological shift was immediate and devastating. Within a generation, Europeans began describing themselves as running out of time, as if duration were a finite resource that could be depleted. They developed anxiety about wasting time, treating moments like coins that could be spent wisely or foolishly. Most disturbing of all, they began to see time as something external to themselves. Master they served rather than a river they navigated. But here's what historians won't tell you about the clock. Revolution. It wasn't driven by practical necessity. Medieval society functioned perfectly well with natural timekeeping methods. The mechanical clock was imposed from above by political and religious authorities who understood something profound about temporal control. When you can dictate how people experience time, you can control how they think, feel, and behave at the most fundamental level. The evidence lies in where the first clocks appeared, not in farms or workshops where precise timing might improve productivity, but in cathedrals and government buildings, where authority needed to be reinforced through psychological conditioning. The mechanical tick-tock became a form of mental programming, training entire populations to internalize rhythms that served institutional power rather than human flourishing. Giovanni da Dandi's astronomical clock, completed in Padua in 1364, reveals the true agenda behind mechanical timekeeping. This wasn't just a device for telling time, it was a comprehensive model of cosmic order designed to replace the fluid, participatory universe of medieval consciousness with a deterministic machine where every component served a predetermined function. The clock's elaborate display showed not just hours and minutes, but planetary positions, feast days, and astrological influences, creating a complete temporal worldview that positioned human beings as cogs in a vast mechanical system. The psychological implications were staggering. For millennia, humans had understood themselves as participants in cosmic rhythms, capable of influencing their relationship with time through ritual, meditation, and conscious alignment with natural cycles. The mechanical clock taught them to see themselves as passive consumers of pre-manufactured temporal units, unable to speed up, slow down, or otherwise modify their temporal experience. This represented the death of what we might call elastic time, the natural human capacity to experience duration differently depending on circumstances, emotions, and levels of consciousness. Children at play enter states where hours pass like minutes. Lovers lose track of time completely. Mystics report experiences where entire lifetimes unfold in moments of profound stillness. The mechanical clock declared all such experiences invalid, imposing a standardized temporal reality that served mechanical efficiency at the expense of psychological wholeness. The spread of mechanical clocks across Europe followed trade routes and military conquest carried by merchants and missionaries who understood that temporal colonization was more effective than political domination. When you control how people experience time, you control their capacity for independent thought, creative expression, and spiritual development. The clock became an instrument of psychological warfare disguised as technological progress. By 1450, mechanical clocks dominated major European cities, their bells marking not just hours, but the rhythm of economic activity, social obligation, and spiritual practice. The Church, which had once organized prayer around natural light cycles and celestial movements, now regulated devotion according to mechanical intervals that bore no relationship to cosmic rhythms or psychological needs. The economic implications were equally profound. Before mechanical clocks, labor was task-oriented. Farmers worked until crops were planted. Artisans labored until projects were completed. Merchants traveled until goods were sold. The mechanical clock introduced wage, labor payment for temporal units rather than completed work, creating the modern economy, where human energy is sold by the hour rather than valued for its creative output. This temporal commodification enabled unprecedented wealth concentration. Those who owned the clock's end, therefore controlled the definition of time, could extract value from those who simply lived within temporal frameworks imposed by others. The mechanical clock became the foundation of industrial capitalism, enabling the systematic conversion of human life energy into corporate profit through precise temporal measurement and control. But the Renaissance clock builders understood something even more sinister about temporal manipulation. The regular tick-tock of mechanical timepieces creates what modern neuroscience calls entrainment, the tendency for biological rhythms to synchronize with external stimuli. Populations exposed to mechanical timekeeping gradually lose their natural circadian flexibility, becoming psychologically dependent on external temporal regulation. This wasn't accidental. Renaissance texts on clockmaking include explicit discussions of using mechanical rhythms to influence human behavior, create social conformity, and reduce independent thinking. The clock builders weren't just creating timekeeping devices. They were implementing a comprehensive program of psychological conditioning designed to produce populations that were predictable, manageable, and profitable. The resistance was immediate and fierce. Across Europe, traditional communities destroyed mechanical clocks, viewing them as instruments of spiritual warfare. The Anabaptists declared mechanical timekeeping a violation of divine order. Folk traditions developed elaborate rituals for cleansing temporal contamination caused by exposure to artificial time. Even within the church, mystical traditions maintained practices for accessing natural time consciousness, despite the growing dominance of mechanical temporality. The most sophisticated resistance came from Renaissance alchemists and natural philosophers, who understood the deeper implications of temporal control. They developed techniques for what they called temporal sovereignty, methods for maintaining natural time consciousness while operating within mechanically regulated society. These practices combined breathing techniques, mathematical meditation, and astronomical observation to create what they described as portable time, the ability to carry natural temporal awareness into any environment. By 1500, the battle for temporal consciousness was largely over. Mechanical clocks had achieved what military conquest and religious conversion could never accomplish: complete colonization of human temporal experience. Entire populations now experienced duration as external constraint rather than internal rhythm, setting the stage for the Industrial Revolution's systematic conversion of human life into mechanical productivity. The psychological damage was permanent and intergenerational. Modern humans suffer from chronic temporal anxiety, feeling constantly rushed despite having more labor-saving devices than any previous civilization. We've lost the capacity for elastic time, trapped in mechanical rhythms that serve economic systems rather than human flourishing. We experience time as scarcity rather than abundance, viewing duration as something to be managed rather than enjoyed. The mechanical clock didn't just change how we measure time, it changed what we are. We became temporal machines ourselves, our biological rhythms subordinated to mechanical intervals, our psychological development constrained by artificial temporal frameworks that prevent the deep time consciousness necessary for wisdom, creativity, and spiritual growth. The ticking continues, marking not just moments, but the gradual mechanical conversion of human consciousness itself. Every second counted is a second colonized. Every minute measured is a moment of natural temporal awareness, lost forever. We are no longer beings who inhabit time. We have become time's prisoners, trapped in cages we built ourselves, mistaking mechanical precision for temporal mastery. The revolution succeeded beyond its architect's wildest dreams. What if everything you believed about time was wrong? For over 2 centuries, humanity lived under Newton's clockwork universe. Time marched forward like a military regiment uniform, predictable, absolute. 1 second in London was identical to 1 second in Tokyo, in the depths of space, or at the edge of a black hole. Time was the great constant, the unshakable foundation upon which all physics rested. Then Albert Einstein shattered that illusion forever. Picture this: you're standing on a train platform, watching 2 trains race past each other in opposite directions. To you, both trains appear to be moving, but to a passenger on one train, their train seems stationary while the other flies by at double speed. This simple observation would unlock the most profound secret about reality itself. Time isn't what we think it is. Einstein's revelation came not through complex mathematics, but through a thought experiment that would make your head spin. Imagine you're holding a flashlight, standing on that same train platform. You shine the light toward the approaching train. Common sense tells you the light should travel faster relative to the train's motion, just like throwing a ball from a moving car. But Einstein realized something disturbing. Light doesn't behave like a ball. Light always travels at the same speed, regardless of how fast you're moving when you shine it. This impossibility demanded an explanation that would reshape everything. If light speed never changes, then something else must give way. That something was time itself. Einstein discovered that time isn't a river flowing at a constant rate. It's more like honey, sometimes thick, sometimes thin, bending and stretching based on how fast you're moving and how deep you are in gravities. Well, the faster you travel through space, the slower you travel through time. It sounds like science fiction, but it's been proven thousands of times over. GPS satellites orbiting Earth experience time slightly faster than we do on the surface. Without accounting for this tiny difference, your navigation would be off by miles within hours. The satellites are literally aging faster than you are. But speed is only half the story. Einstein's second revelation was even more mind. Gravity doesn't just pull objects together, it warps the very fabric of space and time. Imagine a bowling ball placed on a stretched rubber sheet. The ball creates a depression, and if you roll marbles nearby, they curve toward the ball. This is how massive objects bend space-time around them, creating what we experience as gravity. Near massive objects, time crawls. An astronaut falling toward a black hole would appear to slow down from your perspective, their movements becoming more and more sluggish until they seemed frozen at the event horizon. Yet, from their perspective, time would flow. Normally, they'd simply watch the universe outside accelerate into fast forward as they crossed the point of no return. This isn't theoretical anymore. In 2015, scientists detected gravitational waves, ripples in space-time itself, when 2 black holes collided 1.3 billion years ago. The universe rang like a bell, and we finally heard its song. Einstein had predicted these waves a century earlier, long before any technology existed to detect them. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. If time can be warped, stretched, and bent, what does that mean for causality itself? Could an effect precede its cause? Could you, theoretically, send information backward through time? Einstein wrestled with these implications his entire life. He famously called quantum entanglement spooky action at a distance, because it seemed to violate his principle that nothing could travel faster than light. Yet, experiments continue to prove that entangled particles communicate instantaneously across vast distances, as if space-time itself provides a shortcut we don't yet understand. The mathematics of relativity reveal even stranger possibilities. Closed time-like curves paths through space-time that loop back to their starting point are mathematically valid solutions to Einstein's equations. Theoretical constructs like traversable wormholes could, in principle, connect distant regions of space and time. The universe might be riddled with shortcuts we simply haven't learned to navigate. Consider this haunting thought every moment you experience, every decision you make. Every breath you take of it exists simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe. Past, present, and future are all equally real, like frames in an infinitely long film reel. You're not moving through time. You're simply becoming aware of different slices of an eternal four-dimensional sculpture. This perspective transforms everything. Your childhood still exists, playing out in some distant coordinate of space-time. Your future self already exists too, living in moments you haven't experienced yet. Time travel might not require exotic machines. Perhaps consciousness itself is the vehicle, sliding along the timeline of your own existence. Einstein once comforted a friend grieving the loss of a loved one by writing, "For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." He understood that death might simply be stepping off the timeline we're currently experiencing. Not an ending, but a transition to a different perspective on the eternal now. The implications extend beyond philosophy into the realm of human potential. If time is malleable, if consciousness can navigate its currents, what other assumptions about reality might be equally fragile? The shamans who claimed to access past and future simultaneously, the mystics who spoke of eternal moments were they, perhaps, glimpsing truths that science is only now beginning to formalize? Modern physicists are discovering that time might be even stranger than Einstein imagined. Some theories suggest time itself might be an emergent property arising from deeper, timeless quantum processes. Others propose that time might branch and diverge, creating parallel timelines where different versions of history unfold simultaneously. We stand at the threshold of understanding time not as humanity's master, but as its most malleable dimension. Einstein showed us that time bends to our will. We just need to learn how to apply the right kind of pressure. The universe isn't a prison of linear causality. It's a vast ocean of temporal possibility, waiting for us to learn how to navigate its currents. The question isn't whether time travel is possible. The question is whether we're ready to abandon our illusion of temporal imprisonment and embrace our role as navigators of space-time itself. Einstein gave us the map. Now we must find the courage to use it. In 1971, two physicists boarded commercial airliners carrying the most precise clocks humanity had ever built. What they discovered when they landed would prove that time travel isn't science fiction, it's scientific fact. J.C. Haffel and Richard Keating weren't looking for fame. They were testing one of Einstein's most controversial predictions. that time itself could be manipulated by something as simple as buying a plane ticket. Their experiment was elegant in its simplicity, revolutionary in its implications. They synchronized 4 atomic clocks with a reference clock at the U.S. Naval Observatory, then flew them around the world twice eastward, twice westward, while identical clocks remained stationary on Earth. When the flights landed, the traveling clocks had aged differently than their earthbound twins. The eastward flying clocks lost 273 nanoseconds compared to the ground-based reference. The westward clocks gained 273 nanoseconds. The difference was microscopic, barely detectable even by atomic precision, yet it shattered our fundamental understanding of reality. Time wasn't the constant backdrop of existence. We'd assumed it was a variable, as malleable as clay in the hands of motion and gravity. But this was just the beginning. The implications became starkly personal when we began sending humans into space for extended periods. Consider astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent 340 days aboard the International Space Station, while his identical twin brother, Mark, remained on Earth. When Scott returned, he had aged approximately 8.6 milliseconds less than his brother. 8.6 milliseconds, a gap so small it's meaningless in human terms, yet cosmically significant because it proved Einstein's twin paradox wasn't just theoretical mathematics. It was happening to real people. The International Space Station orbits Earth at 17,500 miles per hour, roughly 240 miles above the surface. At this altitude and velocity, 2 relativistic effects compete. Time dilation from high-speed motion makes time run slower for the astronauts, while reduced gravitational field strength makes time run faster. The motion effect wins, meaning astronauts age slightly slower than people on Earth. Every 6-month mission shaves about 1.5 milliseconds off an astronaut's biological clock. Think about what this means for human consciousness. Scott Kelly returned to Earth having experienced fewer moments than his twin brother. His timeline had literally compressed. While Mark experienced 340 days and nights, Scott experienced slightly less, not subjectively, but objectively, measurably. The universe itself had granted him a microscopic extension of life. Now scale this up to the edges of possibility. Imagine an astronaut traveling to Proxima Centauri at 90% the speed of light. The journey would take 4.4 years from Earth's perspective, but due to time dilation, the astronaut would experience only about 1.9 years. They would arrive having aged less than 2 years, while everyone on Earth aged more than 4. This isn't theory, this is what Einstein's equations predict with mathematical certainty. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. The effect becomes more dramatic as you approach light speed. At 99% light speed, time dilation increases by a factor of 7. At 99.9%, it increases by a factor of 22. The astronaut could journey to distant stars and return to find centuries had passed on Earth, while they had aged only years. This asymmetry haunted Einstein in his original thought experiment. Identical twins separate, one stays on Earth, the other travels to a distant star at near light speed. When the space-traveling twin returns, they find their earthbound sibling has aged decades, while they've aged only years. The paradox wasn't in the physics. Einstein's equations clearly predicted this outcome. The paradox was philosophical. Which twin had really traveled through time? The answer lies in acceleration. The earthbound twin experiences consistent gravitational acceleration, while the space-traveling twin experiences multiple phases of acceleration and deceleration. During the turnaround phase, when the traveling twin reverses course to return home, they experience forces that fundamentally alter their relationship with spacetime. The symmetry breaks, and time dilation becomes unidirectional. Tests continue to validate these predictions with unsettling precision. Muon subatomic particles, created when cosmic rays strike Earth's atmosphere, have incredibly short lifespans. At rest, they decay in 2.2 microseconds, far too quickly to survive the journey from the upper atmosphere to Earth's surface. Yet, we detect them at ground level regularly. How? They're traveling at near light speeds, experiencing extreme time dilation. From our perspective, their internal clocks run slow enough for them to complete the journey before decaying. We are constantly bathed in evidence of time travel. Every GPS satellite orbits Earth at approximately 8,700 miles per hour, experiencing time dilation effects that accumulate to about 38 microseconds per day. Without constant correction for these relativistic effects, GPS navigation would become useless within hours. Your phone's ability to pinpoint your location depends on our understanding of time travel. But perhaps the most profound implications emerge when we consider black holes. Near the event horizon of a massive black hole, gravitational time dilation becomes extreme. An astronaut falling toward the black hole would appear to freeze from an outside observer's perspective, their image redshifting into invisibility as time nearly stops. Yet from the astronaut's viewpoint, they would fall normally, watching the universe outside accelerate into fast forward as they cross the point of no return. This isn't speculation. We've observed this effect. In 2020, astronomers watched a star called S to complete its closest approach to Sagittarius A*, the supermassive black hole at our galaxy's center. As S2 approached, its light showed clear signatures of gravitational redshift and time dilation, exactly as Einstein predicted. Consider the psychological implications for future space travelers. Imagine leaving Earth for a 5-year journey to a nearby star system, traveling at 95% light speed. From your perspective, the journey takes 5 years, but when you return, you discover that 15 years have passed on Earth. Everyone you knew has aged 15 years while you've aged 5. You've traveled 10 years into their future. This isn't science fiction. This is the documented, measured, experimentally verified nature of spacetime. We've already proven time travel works. We've measured it happening to real people. The only question remaining is how far we're willing to push the boundaries. The Haffel-Keating experiment opened a door we can never close. It proved that time isn't the universal constant we assumed, but a dimension as navigable as the 3 spatial dimensions we move through daily. Every time you drive east or west, every time you climb a mountain or descend into a valley, every time you accelerate or decelerate, you're manipulating your relationship with time itself. The twin paradox isn't a paradox anymore. It's a promise. We've proven that time travel is not only possible, but inevitable for anyone who moves through space. The question isn't whether we can travel through time. We're already doing it. The question is how much time we're willing to trade for the journey. What if the universe contained secret passages, hidden shortcuts that could transport you not just across vast distances, but through time itself? In 1935, while exploring the geometry of black holes, they found that the equations predicted something impossible: tunnels through space-time itself. These weren't physical structures you could see or touch, but actual geometric shortcuts woven into the fabric of reality, bridges connecting distant regions of space and time through dimensions we can barely comprehend. They called it the Einstein-Rosen bridge. The rest of us call it a wormhole. Picture space-time as a vast sheet of paper. A black hole creates a deep depression in this sheet, warping space and time around it. But Einstein and Rosen realized that if you pushed hard enough, the depression might punch completely through the sheet, creating a tunnel to another part of the universe. The mouth of this tunnel would appear as a black hole from one side, and a white hole, a theoretical object that expels matter instead of consuming it, from the other. The implications were staggering. The universe at the speed of light. You could theoretically step through a wormhole and emerge elsewhere instantaneously. Distance became meaningless. The journey from Earth to the Andromeda Galaxy, normally a 2.5 million year trip at light speed, could potentially take minutes through the right wormhole. But here's where physics becomes stranger then. And Rosen's original bridge had a fatal flaw. It was inherently unstable. The moment anything tried to pass through it, even a single photon of light, the wormhole would collapse faster than the speed of light, crushing whatever was inside into a singularity. Could traverse it. It was like discovering a door to another dimension that slammed shut the instant you touched the handle. This fundamental instability haunted physicists for decades. How could nature create these cosmic shortcuts only to make them impassable? The answer came from an unexpected source: the strange world of quantum mechanics. In 1988, detecting gravitational waves proposed a radical solution. What if you could prop open a wormhole using exotic matter with negative energy density? This wasn't ordinary matter as we know it, but a theoretical substance that would repel rather than attract, pushing against the sides of the wormhole tunnel and preventing it from collapsing. Imagine inflating a balloon inside a collapsing tunnel. The exotic matter would act like that balloon, creating outward pressure that kept the passageway stable. Suddenly, traversable wormholes became theoretically possible. The universe's hidden passages could be opened and navigated, but exotic matter posed its own mysteries. Quantum field theory suggests it might exist in microscopic quantities between the plates of what's called a Casimir capacitor, where quantum fluctuations create regions of negative energy. Yet the amounts required to stabilize even a small wormhole would exceed the mass energy of entire star systems. The mathematics, however, remained tantalizingly precise. Thorne's calculations showed that a traversable wormhole would require exotic matter equal to about minus 10 billion solar masses. The negative energy would need to be distributed in a precise configuration along the throat of the wormhole, creating what physicists call a stress-energy tensor that violates every normal condition of matter we've ever observed. It was like requiring anti-gravity on a cosmic scale. Yet the equations didn't just permit this, they demanded it for stability. Consider what traveling through such a wormhole would actually feel like. As you approached the mouth, tidal forces would stretch your body just like falling into a black hole. But these forces could theoretically be minimized with the right geometry. Few miles long, with walls that curve gently inward. You might see strange distortions of light from the other side. Stars and galaxies twisted into unfamiliar patterns by the warped space-time. Then you'd emerge somewhere or someone else entirely. Because here's the truly mind-bending aspect. Wormholes don't just connect different places, they can connect different times. If one mouth of the wormhole is accelerated to near light speed, while the other remains stationary, time dilation creates a temporal offset between the two openings. Centuries in the past or future. This transforms wormholes from mere transportation devices into time machines. The grandfather paradox immediately rears its head. Physicist Igor Nevikov proposed what's now called the Nevikov self-consistency principle. The universe would conspire to prevent paradoxes through quantum mechanical effects we don't yet understand. You might find your time-traveling attempts mysteriously thwarted by seemingly random events, as if space-time itself were protecting its own causality. Recent theoretical work has revealed even stranger possibilities. In 2013, physicists Leonard Susskind and Juan Maldacena proposed that quantum entanglement, Einstein's spooky action at a distance, might actually be equivalent to microscopic wormholes connecting entangled particles. When two particles become entangled, they might literally be connected by tiny Einstein-Rosen bridges threaded through higher dimensions. This equals EPR. Conjecture suggests that entanglement and wormholes are the same phenomenon viewed from different perspectives. Every quantum measurement, every collapse of a wave function, might involve information traveling through microscopic shortcuts in spacetime. The universe could be riddled with quantum tunnels, too small to traverse, but fundamental to realities. Operation Dot. Think about what this means for consciousness itself. If quantum processes in your brain involve entangled particles, and if entanglement operates through microscopic wormholes, then your thoughts might literally be threading through higher dimensional space. Consciousness could be fundamentally distributed across multiple regions of spacetime through quantum tunnels we can't directly perceive. Some physicists have proposed that sufficiently advanced civilizations might learn to manufacture wormholes using technology we can barely imagine. They might create networks of stable tunnels connecting distant star systems, turning the galaxy into a navigable subway system. Travel times that normally require thousands of years could be reduced to hours or minutes. But here's the unsettling question. If such technology is possible, where are the time travelers from the future? One possibility is that wormhole time travel operates under strict consistency requirements that we don't yet understand. Perhaps you can only travel back to the moment the first end of a wormhole was created, making time travel impossible until someone actually builds the first temporal gateway. We might be living in the pre-wormhole era, isolated from our own future by the simple fact that no one has yet learned to fold space-time into traversable shortcuts. Another possibility is more disturbing. Perhaps the universe has built-in mechanisms that prevent or destroy civilizations that approach wormhole technology. The Fermi paradox, the strange absence of detectable alien civilizations. Despite the universe's vast age and size might be explained by natural or artificial barriers that eliminate species before they can master space-time engineering. Or maybe they're already here, moving through tunnels in space-time that remain invisible to our current understanding of physics. The unexplained phenomena throughout human history, the sudden appearances and disappearances, the impossible accelerations observed in UAP encounters, the seeming violations of known physical laws might be glimpses of technology based on wormhole manipulation. Consider this haunting possibility. What if consciousness itself occasionally slips through natural microscopic wormholes in the brain? The phenomenon of déjà vu, prophetic dreams, sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere. Perhaps these are momentary leaks through quantum tunnels that connect different regions of your personal timeline. The mathematics of wormholes remain elegant and precise, even if the engineering challenges seem insurmountable with current technology. Einstein's equations permit these cosmic shortcuts. Nature allows them in principle. The only question is whether the universe provides the exotic ingredients necessary to keep them open, and whether conscious beings can learn to navigate the deepest architecture of space-time itself. We stand at the threshold of understanding that space and time might not be the barriers we've assumed, but a navigable medium filled with hidden passages. The Einstein-Rosen bridge isn't just a mathematical curiosity, it's a map of possibility, showing us that the universe might be far stranger, far more interconnected. We just need to learn how to cross them. What if the government's most classified secret wasn't about nuclear weapons or alien contact, but about something far more dangerous, the ability to tear holes in time itself? In 1983, a young man named Duncan Cameron walked out of Montauk Air Force Base on Long Island with no memory of how he'd gotten there. His last clear recollection was from 1943, aboard the USS Eldridge during what would later become known as the Philadelphia Experiment. 40 years had vanished from his mind, like pages torn from a book. When investigators began piecing together his story, they uncovered allegations so disturbing that the military allegedly shut down the entire facility and buried the evidence beneath tons of concrete. The story begins with radar invisibility, research during World War II, according to Cameron and others who claimed to be involved. The Navy had successfully rendered the destroyer USS Eldridge invisible to radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. But something went catastrophically wrong. Instead of just bending radar waves around the ship, the experiment had bent space-time itself, creating a temporal displacement that hurled crew members decades into the future. The survivors of that experiment, the story goes, were secretly transferred to a new facility, Montauk Air Force Base, built on the ruins of a decommissioned radar station. Montauk allegedly became the epicenter of the most ambitious and reckless experiments in human history, using technology reverse-engineered from recovered extraterrestrial craft, or so the witnesses claimed. Scientists attempted to master the fundamental forces that Einstein had only theorized about. Their goal wasn't just to understand time travel, but to weaponize it. The facility's most distinctive feature was a massive radar dish, officially used for air defense during the Cold War. But according to whistleblowers, this dish had been modified with exotic technology that could focus psychic energy and manipulate the electromagnetic field of the Earth itself. The dish allegedly served as an antenna for projecting human consciousness across time and space, turning gifted psychics into living time machines. Duncan Cameron claimed to be one of these psychic operatives, strapped into a chair, surrounded by electromagnetic coils. His mind would be amplified and projected through time, allowing him to observe past and future events with disturbing clarity. But the experiments went far beyond mere observation. Cameron alleged that his consciousness could actually influence past events, creating temporal loops and paradoxes that the scientists struggled to control. The testimony becomes more unsettling when multiple witnesses describe similar experiences independently. Al Belek, who claimed to be Cameron's brother and a fellow time traveler, provided corroborating details about the facility's layout, personnel, and experimental procedures. He described underground levels that extended deep beneath the base, housing equipment so advanced it seemed to operate on principles that mainstream physics hadn't yet discovered. The technology allegedly combined elements of Tesla's electromagnetic research, von Neumann's computer architecture, and alien engineering that defied conventional understanding. Preston Nichols, who claimed to be the project's technical director, provided detailed descriptions of the equipment used to manipulate time. He described massive computers that somehow interfaced directly with human consciousness, amplifying psychic abilities to the point where thoughts could reshape reality itself. The most disturbing aspect of his testimony was the suggestion that the experiments had created permanent rifts in space-time, wounds in the fabric of reality that continued to bleed temporal anomalies long after the project was shut down. But here's where the story becomes genuinely disturbing. Regardless of its veracity, independent researchers investigating Montauk have documented numerous unexplained phenomena in the area. Local residents report bizarre temporal distortions, clocks running backward, people aging rapidly or slowly without explanation, and encounters with individuals who claim to be from different time periods. The abandoned base itself allegedly exhibits strange properties. Compasses spin wildly, electronic equipment malfunctions, and some visitors report experiencing vivid memories of events they never witnessed. The psychological profiles of the alleged participants add another layer of mystery. Many of the witnesses demonstrate detailed knowledge of advanced physics concepts that wouldn't be publicly known for decades after their supposed involvement. Their descriptions of theoretical time travel mechanisms align closely with cutting-edge research in quantum mechanics and relativity theory. Yet these individuals claim to have learned these concepts through direct experimentation in the 1970s and 1980s. More troubling is the pattern of missing time and recovered memories among the witnesses. Many participants report decades-long amnesia that was only broken through hypnotic regression or accidental triggers. The consistency of their recovered memories, combined with their shared knowledge of highly classified military procedures, suggests either an extraordinarily elaborate hoax or genuine involvement in classified research. The government's response to Montauk allegations has been consistently dismissive, yet suspiciously thorough. Official records of the base's activities during the alleged experimental period have been heavily redacted or classified beyond public access. When the base was finally decommissioned, the cleanup was unusually extensive. Entire underground levels were reportedly filled with concrete and the site was declared permanently off-limits to civilian access. This pattern of aggressive secrecy extends to related research programs that are documented historical fact. Project MKUltra, the CIA's mind control experiments, did involve attempts to manipulate human consciousness using electromagnetic fields, psychoactive drugs, and sensory deprivation. The Philadelphia experiment, while officially denied, has enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that some form of electromagnetic invisibility research was conducted during World War II. Consider the theoretical framework that would make Montauk-style experiments possible. Modern physics acknowledges that consciousness might play a fundamental role in quantum mechanics through the observer effect. If consciousness can collapse wave functions and influence quantum states, then amplifying consciousness through electromagnetic fields might theoretically allow it to influence larger-scale phenomena, including the structure of space-time itself. The technology described by Montauk witnesses chairs that interface directly with the human brain, computers that amplify thought, electromagnetic fields that focus psychic energy sounds fantastical, yet similar research is being conducted openly today. Brain-computer interfaces are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and the military's documented interest in psychic phenomena through programs like Stargate suggests that consciousness-based technologies were considered viable research directions. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Montauk allegations isn't their claims about time travel. It's their implications about the nature of reality itself. If the witnesses are telling the truth, then the experiments allegedly revealed that past and future exist simultaneously, that consciousness can navigate between different temporal coordinates, and that reality is far more malleable than we assume. The participants describe experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously, observing alternate versions of history where different choices led to different outcomes. These descriptions align disturbingly well with many worlds' interpretations of quantum mechanics, which suggest that every quantum event creates branching universes where all possible outcomes occur. If consciousness can somehow access these parallel branches, then time travel wouldn't involve moving through a single timeline, but navigating between different versions of reality. The alleged shutdown of the Montauk Project in 1983 supposedly occurred after an experiment went catastrophically wrong, creating a temporal rift that began consuming the facility itself. According to witnesses, the scientists lost control of their time manipulation technology, and reality began collapsing into contradictory states. The base was evacuated, the equipment destroyed, and the entire program buried under layers of official denial. Yet the witnesses claim the damage was already done. The experiments had allegedly created permanent alterations in the structure of space-time around Montauk, turning the area into a kind of temporal anomaly zone where the normal rules of causality don't apply. Some researchers suggest that these alterations continue to influence events, creating a feedback loop between past experiments and present reality. Whether you view the Montauk Project as elaborate fiction or suppressed truth, it raises profound questions about the relationship between consciousness, technology, and time. The consistency of witness testimony, the depth of technical detail, and the documented history of related government programs suggest that something unusual occurred at Montauk Air Force, based during the Cold War. the most disturbing possibility isn't that the experiments succeeded, but that they partially succeeded, creating temporal distortions that continue to influence reality in ways we don't understand. If consciousness can indeed influence the structure of space-time, then the greatest secret isn't what the government knows about time travel, but what they've learned about the terrifying power of the human mind itself. What happens when cause and effect collapse into an impossible loop, where the very act of traveling through time destroys the reason you traveled in the first place? Imagine you've just built a time machine. Your first impulse, like any rational person, is to prevent a tragedy, preventing the chain of events that led to your birth. You succeed, but now you were never born to build the time machine that allowed you to travel back and prevent your own existence. Yet, if you were never born, who prevented your grandparents from meeting? The logic devours itself, creating an impossibility that philosophers call the grandfather paradox. This isn't just an intellectual puzzle. It's a fundamental crack in the architecture of causality itself. The grandfather paradox reveals the first of time travel's conceptual horrors, the causal loop. Every action you take in the past creates consequences that ripple forward, potentially erasing the very conditions that made your time travel possible. It's like sawing off the branch you're sitting on, except the branch exists across multiple dimensions of space-time. But the grandfather paradox is merely the beginning. Consider something even more disturbing: the bootstrap paradox, where information or objects exist without origin. Picture this scenario. You travel back in time and give Shakespeare a collection of his own plays, which he then publishes as his own work. Where did the plays originally come from? Shakespeare didn't write them, you gave them to him, but you got them from Shakespeare's published works. The information exists in a closed causal loop with no point of origin, no moment of creation. The plays simply exist, bootstrapped into reality through temporal manipulation. This violation of causality extends beyond mere objects to knowledge itself. Imagine traveling back to give Einstein the theory of relativity. Einstein publishes the theory which you later study and carried back in time to give to Einstein. The knowledge exists without ever being discovered or created, simply loops through time like a temporal parasite, feeding on its own causality. Real-world physics offers several potential solutions to these paradoxes, each more unsettling than the last. The first is the many worlds solution. Every time you travel to the past and change something, you create a new timeline that branches away from your original universe. When you prevent your grandparents from meeting, you don't erase yourself from existence. You create an alternate timeline where you were never born, while your original timeline continues to exist unchanged. You become a temporal refugee, stranded in a universe that isn't quite your own. This interpretation suggests that every time traveler is condemned to exile from their original reality. The universe you return to might look identical to the one you left, but it would be subtly different. Parallel world where different quantum events occurred, where different choices were made. You might find that your childhood memories no longer match historical records, which suggests that the universe conspires to prevent paradoxes through seemingly coincidental events. Every time you attempt to change the past, Mysterious circumstances intervene to ensure that history unfolds exactly as it always did. Your gun jams when you try to assassinate Hitler. Your time machine malfunctions when you attempt to prevent disasters. The universe becomes a cosmic puppet master, manipulating events to preserve its own causality. Under this interpretation, free will becomes an illusion when time travel is involved. You believe you're making choices, but the universe has already determined the outcome to prevent paradoxes. You're not changing history, you're fulfilling it. But perhaps the most psychologically devastating solution is the predestination paradox, where your attempts to prevent an event actually cause it to occur. Consider the Greek myth of Oedipus, updated for the time travel era. His car at the exact time and place you were trying to help him avoid. Your knowledge of the future becomes the cause of the very event you sought to prevent. This creates a closed temporal loop where effect precedes cause. The car accident happens because you knew it would happen. Your knowledge comes from the accident, but the accident is caused by your knowledge. Information flows backward through time to create its own origin. In a universe where time travel is possible, knowledge becomes a temporal virus that can infect its own past. Facts about the future can travel backward and become the cause of their own truth. Prophecies become self-fulfilling not through mystical means, but through the mechanical operation of causality in reverse. The psychological implications for time travelers are profound and terrifying. Every decision you make in the past carries the weight of potentially destroying entire minds. Every word you speak might prevent someone from being born. Every action might cascade into global consequences. The responsibility is paralyzing. How do you function knowing that your smallest mistake could erase millions of people from existence? This burden explains why many theoretical frameworks for time travel include what physicists call the temporal ethics problem. When you alter history, are you committing murder on a temporal scale, erasing people who would have existed in the original timeline? Some philosophers argue that the people you prevent from being born never really existed, so their erasure isn't morally significant. Others contend that potential existence has moral weight, making time travel an act of cosmic vandalism. Still others suggest that all possible timelines exist simultaneously in what's called the eternal block universe, meaning time travel doesn't erase anything. It simply navigates between different regions of an infinite temporal landscape. But here's where the paradoxes become personally intimate. What happens to your own identity when you travel through time? If you travel back and prevent your parents from meeting, creating a timeline where you're never born, do you continue to exist as a temporal anomaly? Are you a ghost haunting a universe that has no place for you? Your memories, your personality, your entire sense of self becomes evidence of a timeline that no longer exists. You become living proof of a contradiction. Alternatively, if the many worlds interpretation is correct, every time you travel through time, you become separated from the universe where your loved ones exist. The family you left behind continues. There lives in a parallel timeline, never knowing what happened to you. Meanwhile, you're surrounded by people who look like your family but have subtly different histories, different personalities shaped by the changes you've introduced. This raises the ultimate question. If you could travel through time but could never return to your original timeline, would the journey be worth it? Would you trade your entire reality for the ability to witness history firsthand, knowing that you could never go home? Wormholes and rotating black holes. The physics allows it, but the logical consequences are so mind-bending that they challenge our basic assumptions about identity, causality, and free will. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that these paradoxes reveal something fundamental about the nature of time itself. Maybe time isn't the linear progression we experience, but a complex geometric structure where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Maybe causality is an emergent property that breaks down at the quantum level, where effects can precede causes and information can flow backward through time. The paradoxes of time travel aren't just intellectual puzzles, they're glimpses into the underlying architecture of reality. They suggest that our common sense understanding of cause and effect might be crude approximations of something far more strange and wonderful. The universe might be a place where every moment exists eternally, where every possible timeline unfolds simultaneously, where the very concept of change is an illusion created by the limitations of consciousness. Moving through higher dimensional space, the paradoxes don't break time travel. They reveal that reality itself is paradoxical, a logical impossibility that somehow manages to exist anyway in the end. The greatest paradox might be consciousness itself. How can we be aware of time's passage if all moments exist simultaneously? How can we experience change in a universe where everything that ever was or will be exists eternally? Perhaps we're all time travelers, navigating through the temporal dimension one moment at a time, unaware that we're already everywhere we'll ever be. What if particles could communicate with their own past, sending information backward through time at the quantum level? Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, the bizarre phenomenon where two particles, once entangled, remain mysteriously connected across any distance instantaneously. Change the spin of one particle, and its entangled partner responds immediately, even if separated by billions of light years. This violated Einstein's fundamental belief that nothing could travel faster than light. Yet experiment after experiment has confirmed that quantum entanglement is undeniably real. But recent discoveries have revealed something even more disturbing. Entanglement doesn't just connect particles across space, it connects them across time. In 2013, physicist Eli Megiddish and his team at Hebrew Siders University performed an experiment that shattered our understanding of causality itself. They created entangled photons. But with a twist, one photon was measured and destroyed before its entangled partner even existed. According to classical logic, this should be impossible. You can't entangle something with nothing. Yet, when the second photon was finally created and measured, it showed perfect correlation with its long-destroyed partner. The implications are staggering. Quantum entanglement operates outside the normal flow of time. This phenomenon, called entanglement swapping across time, suggests that particles can form connections with other particles that don't yet exist, or that have already been destroyed. The quantum world operates according to rules that make linear time irrelevant. Future measurements can influence past states. Particles that never coexist can share information. The universe's information processing system includes channels that flow backward through time, Consider what this means for the nature of reality itself. Every quantum measurement you make today might be influenced by measurements that haven't happened yet. The particles in your body, formed in ancient stellar furnaces, might still be entangled with particles scattered across the cosmos, creating an invisible network of instantaneous communication that transcends both space and time. But here's where quantum time reversal becomes genuinely mind-bending. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness itself might play a role in collapsing quantum wave functions, potentially giving awareness the power to influence past quantum states through future observations. Physicist John Wheeler proposed the delayed choice experiment to test this possibility. In his thought experiment, the decision of how to measure a photon determines whether it behaved as a wave or particle during its journey, even if that journey began billions of years ago when the photon left a distant star. Your choice of measurement today retroactively determines the photon's behavior throughout its cosmic journey. This has been tested and confirmed. Astronomers have performed Wheeler's delayed choice experiment using photons from quasars billions of light years away. The measurement choice made in the laboratory today appears to influence how those photons behaved billions of years in the past. Before Earth even existed, the philosophical implications are staggering. If consciousness can retroactively influence quantum events, then awareness might operate as a temporal force, reaching backward through time to shape the very history it observes. Your decisions today might literally be rewriting the past at the quantum level. This connects to an even stranger possibility: retrocausality in quantum mechanics. Some interpretations suggest that quantum events don't have definite outcomes until they're observed, and that this observation can work backward through time. The future doesn't just emerge from the past. The future helps create the past through a process called retrocausal influence. Think about what this means for free will and determinism. If future quantum measurements can influence past quantum states, then the future is actively participating in creating its own history. The universe might be engaged in a constant dialogue between past and future, with each temporal direction influencing the other through quantum channels that operate outside normal causality. Recent experiments in quantum biology suggest that living systems might already be exploiting these temporal quantum effects. Photosynthesis in plants appears to use quantum superposition to explore multiple energy paths simultaneously, selecting the most efficient route through a process that seems to involve future knowledge of optimal outcomes. Birds' magnetic navigation might rely on quantum entanglement effects that operate across time as well as space to your brain. With its billions of quantum-scale microtubules and synaptic connections, might be operating as a biological quantum computer that processes information from multiple temporal coordinates simultaneously. Consciousness might naturally exist in quantum superposition across past, present, and future states, with focused attention collapsing this temporal superposition into the experience of linear time. This would explain why meditation and altered states of consciousness often involve experiences of timelessness or temporal non-linearity. You're not losing track of time, you're accessing consciousness in its natural quantum state, where temporal boundaries dissolve and past, present, and future exist as accessible dimensions of a single eternal moment. The universe's quantum substrate might be riddled with temporal tunnels that allow information to flow backward through time at microscopic scales. Every quantum measurement creates a small ripple that propagates both forward and backward through history. The apparent randomness of quantum events might actually reflect the influence of future measurements reaching backward to shape their own causal origins. We're discovering that time travel isn't something that might be possible in the future. It's already happening continuously at the quantum level. The question isn't whether particles can communicate across time, but whether consciousness can learn to tap into these existing quantum time channels and amplify them to macroscopic scales. The quantum world has already solved the paradoxes of time travel through mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. Reality operates as a temporal democracy where past, present, and future all vote on what actually happened. We just need to learn how to join the conversation. What if every moment you've ever lived in, every moment you ever will live exists right now, frozen in an eternal four-dimensional sculpture? Picture a loaf of bread sitting on your kitchen counter. Each slice represents a moment in time: your birth, your first kiss, your death, and every heartbeat in between. From your perspective, you experience only one slice at a time, moving through the loaf like a knife making sequential cuts. But the entire loaf exists simultaneously. Your childhood isn't gone, it's simply located at a different coordinate in space-time, as real and present as this moment you're experiencing now. This is the block universe theory, and it suggests that everything that ever happened or will happen already exists in what physicists call the eternal now. Einstein himself believed in this radical view of time. When his lifelong friend, Michel Besso, died, Einstein wrote to Besso's family, "For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." He wasn't offering empty comfort, he was describing what his equations revealed about the fundamental structure of reality. General relativity demolishes our intuitive understanding of time as a universal flow. There is no cosmic clock ticking away universal moments. Instead, time is relative. It runs differently for observers moving at different speeds or experiencing different gravitational fields. This means there's no universal now that spans the entire universe. What you consider the present moment might be the past for a fast-moving observer or the future for someone deep in a gravitational well. If there's no universal now, then all moments must exist equally. The block universe emerges naturally from Einstein's mathematics, suggesting that space-time is a fixed four-dimensional structure where past, present, and future are simply different directions, like north, south, east, and west. But here's where the theory becomes personally disturbing. If the block universe is real, then free will might be an illusion. Consider the implications. If your entire life already exists as a completed four-dimensional object, then your future actions are already determined. When you believe you're making a choice, you're simply becoming aware of a decision that already exists at specific space-time coordinates. Your sense of agency, the feeling that you're actively creating your future through conscious decisions, becomes a subjective experience of discovering a predetermined path. Yet the theory offers a strange comfort. If the block universe is real, then death loses its finality. Your deceased loved ones aren't gone, they exist eternally at their specific space-time coordinates. Your grandmother's laugh during Christmas 1987 is as real now as it was then. The moment exists forever, accessible through the right navigation of four-dimensional space. This perspective transforms grief into geography. Missing someone becomes like missing a distant country you can't visit right now, but it continues to exist. Your loved ones are separated from you by temporal distance rather than non-existence. They're still there, still laughing, still loving, simply located at different coordinates in the eternal structure of space-time. The block universe theory also offers a startling new perspective on consciousness itself. If all moments exist simultaneously, then consciousness might be the mechanism that creates the illusion of temporal flow. Your awareness moves through the block like a flashlight beam, illuminating different sections of a vast landscape. The beam itself creates the experience of now. Everything in the light feels present, while areas outside the beam seem past or future. But here's where the metaphor breaks down in fascinating ways. Unlike a flashlight beam that moves smoothly, consciousness might jump discontinuously between moments, creating the sensation of smooth temporal flow through discrete quantum leaps. Your brain constructs the experience of flowing time by stitching together moment-to-moment snapshots, like a film projector, creating motion from still frames. Recent neuroscience research supports this view. Your brain doesn't experience time. Continuously it processes reality in discrete chunks, roughly 40 milliseconds long. Between these chunks, consciousness essentially blinks off, creating gaps that your mind fills in to maintain the illusion of continuous experience. You're not smoothly flowing through time, you're quantum tunneling between temporal coordinates, with consciousness editing out the discontinuities. This raises profound questions about identity and persistence. If you're not flowing through time, but rather exist as a four-dimensional object with different temporal parts, then what connects your childhood self to your adult self? Are you the same person who went to sleep last night, or just a temporal slice that shares memories with yesterday's version? The block universe suggests that personal identity might be an illusion created by memory and continuity of experience. You're not a thing that persists through time, you're a pattern distributed across space-time, with different temporal segments connected by information flow rather than substantial continuity. Yet perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the block universe is its implication for meaning and purpose. If everything already exists, if the future is as fixed as the past, then why do anything? Why strive? Why struggle? Why hope? The answer might lie in recognizing that even though outcomes might be predetermined, your experience of choosing and striving is part of what makes those outcomes real. Your decisions don't create the future, existing eternally as part of the four-dimensional structure of reality. The block universe doesn't eliminate meaning, it makes meaning eternal. Every act of love, every moment of joy, every instance of courage exists forever in the cosmic sculpture of space-time. Nothing is ever truly lost because loss itself is just another direction in four-dimensional space. We are not travelers moving through time, we are time itself made. You're standing at the edge of the future, holding a strange device in your hand. It's not made of wires or metal. Instead, It feels like it's built from every regret you've ever had, every bad decision, every cruel word you wish you hadn't said, every painful moment that left a scar on your heart. But here's the truth about time travel. It's not really about science. It's about silence. The silence that comes when you realize you're about to become something humans were never meant to be. Someone with the power to control outcomes. A god of consequences. The first big question is this: do you have the right to take away someone else's chance to grow? That heartbreak that nearly broke you when you were 19, it also taught you to care deeply. That failure that embarrassed you in front of your coworkers, it made you stronger. If you remove the pain, you might also erase the version of yourself that grew through it. Take Sarah Chen, for example. She's a physicist. She lost her daughter in a car accident and spent the next 20 years working on time travel, all because of her deep grief. Eventually, she succeeds. She can finally go back and save her child. But here's the problem. If she saves her daughter, those 20 years of scientific work never happen. All of her discoveries gone. One of those discoveries helped solve a major time paradox. That solution, which would have saved 3 million lives in the future, disappears. So now Sarah faces a terrible choice. One life for 3 million. It's not just a math problem. It's a moral one, and it's overwhelming. Then there's another side to it, the curiosity. If you could time travel, you could watch your own death. You could see ancient civilizations rise and fall. You could witness the final star in the universe burn out. But this kind of knowledge is heavy. Imagine knowing the exact moment your loved one will leave you, or the day you'll fall sick, or the sentence that will ruin your career. That's not wisdom. That's a mental prison made of too much truth and no way to escape it. Now consider Dr. Martinez, a philosopher who studies time. He asks a terrifying question. What if every terrible thing that ever happened, wars, genocides, tragedies, actually stopped something even worse? What if the Holocaust prevented something more horrific? Would you still go back and stop it? Or could you live with the idea that some evil might have prevented something greater? Even personal choices are scary. Let's say you visit your younger self. Do you tell them about the disease they'll get, the person who will betray them, the heartbreak they're about to suffer? Or do you let them live with hope, knowing that hope is what will help them survive the hard times? Editing your past is dangerous. You are who you are because of your mistakes and painful moments. If you erase all the bad things, you might erase who you are. You could end up a stranger in your own skin. And here's the most terrifying part. Time doesn't care about your good intentions. You might save one life and unknowingly cause a chain reaction that hurts thousands. You might stop one war and spark 3 more. Every act of kindness could cause unexpected damage somewhere in the future. That's why maybe the universe doesn't stop time travel with physics, but with psychology. It lets you imagine changing the past, but it makes sure you can never forget the things you didn't change or the things you broke while trying to fix others. And finally, the most difficult question of all. If you had the chance, would you go back in time and stop yourself from being born? Not because you're depressed, but because you know your life caused pain to others. Would you erase your own existence to spare them? Time travel ethics aren't really about changing events. They're about understanding that some powers are too big too dangerous for us. They're about realizing that real wisdom doesn't mean fixing everything. It means understanding why some things must stay broken, and learning to live with that, changing the past. Maybe it's learning how to forgive yourself for being human, for making mistakes, for hurting others unintentionally, for not knowing better at the time. In the end, the real question is this: if you could travel through time, would you still be able to recognize yourself when you got there? What if time isn't the river we've always imagined, carrying us helplessly downstream? What if it's an ocean, vast, deep, and infinite, and we've been walking along its shore our entire lives, never realizing we could swim? In dreams, sometimes, we do. We float weightless between moments that never were and futures that might still be. We drift past our childhood selves, wave to lovers we haven't met yet, and touch the hands of people we've forgotten we once knew. Maybe that's what time really is, not a prison of ticking seconds, but an endless sea where every possibility exists simultaneously. Where your laughter at 7 years old still echoes, where your great-grandchildren's dreams are already taking shape, where every choice you never made lives on in the depths. Tonight, when you close your eyes and feel yourself floating in that space between waking and sleep, remember, you might not be dreaming at all. You might finally be swimming